Welcome back to the Fantasy Baseball Cafe podcast. I'm your host, Josh Shepherdson. On Twitter, you can follow me at BChad50, and I'm back today to bring you the starting pitcher rankings for this season. 100 deep, daunting position to rank, a lot of information to go over, pitch FX data, just a ton to go over when you're ranking pitchers. Not the easiest task. A lot of differences in rankings usually between experts, and for good reason. There's a lot of things to look at, a lot of things that some people prefer to other experts. So I've got my top 100 rankings up on FantasyBaseballCafe.com. You can pull those up if you'd like to follow along as the podcast goes along. Speaking of content at FantasyBaseballCafe.com, a lot of good content going up right now if you're still preparing for drafts. Even if you've already had your draft, some good content if you're looking to figure out, who might be on the waiver wire that's better than what you have. Some good closer content up, sleepers and breakouts. We got team by team power ranking fantasy previews by Brad Johnson. We've got my rankings. We've got Dahla's rankings. Tons of good stuff. And the fantasy forums as well. Great. Hop on, chat with some fantasy baseball centric people like yourself, and enjoy yourself. I mean, this is a time to get excited. It's almost opening day coming up here pretty soon, so get excited. This time next week, next Monday, we will be enjoying real baseball, and then we've got Sunday night's opener, so it's almost here. Let's get ready, and let's kick things off with the obvious top pitcher. That's Clayton Kershaw. Guy's a machine. Won the National League MVP last year despite missing time. Posted a 31.9% strikeout rate, .86 whip, 1.81 FIP, 51.8% ground ball rate, ranked 15th among qualified starting pitchers last year. He does it all, keeps ball on the ground, limits base runners, misses bats. Enough said. He is the top arm. He's a first-round pick, and he's a great anchor, especially in roto leagues, I would say, where you really need that pitching. In head-to-head leagues, maybe you can get away with streaming and doing some odds and ends to beat your opponents. Still a first-round pick there, but I would say he has more value in roto than head-to-head, even though he can carry head-to-head teams. But Kershaw, slam dunk first-round pick, possibly a top-5 pick if you're willing to build forego a hitter to get that clear-cut ace and top pitcher. King Felix checks in second. We got a track record of success with him. Big bat misser, 27.2% strikeout rate, .92 whip, 2.56 FIP, and his 56.2% ground ball rate last year was third among qualified starters. Backed by an even better offense this year with the Mariners. Pitches deep into games, should get a lot of decisions. Could win more games with the addition of Nelson Cruz to help bolster that offense. So I'm a big King Felix fan. Third is Chris Sale. Looks like he's only going to miss one start in April. So don't go crazy moving him down your rankings. 30.4% strikeout rate, .97 whip, 2.57 FIP. The lone fly in the ointment is not a great ground ball rate for a homer-friendly park, but when you're allowing less than when you have a sub-1 whip, you're not allowing base runners. In the rare event the ball gets knocked out of the yard, there's nobody on anyway. So love Sal, love the strikeout rate, love the ability to limit base runners, can really anchor his staff. Fourth is Max Scherzer, moves from the American League Central to the National League East, pitching with a loaded offense behind him, something he's used to. Now he's got the Nationals backing him instead of a loaded Tigers lineup. Might have a better defense behind him, actually. So should get a boost. 27.9% K rate, 1.18 whip, 2.85 FIP last year. Should post a sub-3 ERA. Should strike out a boatload of batters, and should pick up some W's backed by a really good offense in Washington. This is Madison Bumgarner. No, there's going to be some people scared off by the high inning total last year. I get it. I'm not one of those. Love his home ballpark. 25.1% strikeout rate. Might be a little bit of upside for more. Big swinging strike rate last year. 1.09 whip. BABIP was a little bit inflated compared to his career rate. I do think there's some upside for the whip to drop a little bit. 3.05 FIP. Could flirt with another sub-3 ERA. He is exactly what you're looking for when you're anchoring a staff. Love Madison Bumgarner. 6 is Corey Kluber, 28.3% strikeout rate, 1.09 whip, 2.35 FIP last year. truly, completely broke out, winning the American League Cy Young. Doesn't have the track record of success of the others, but he has a huge bat missing arsenal. Really like Corey Kluber, really buy what he did. The fact that he pitches in the American League does hurt him compared to Scherzer and Bumgarner ranked in front of him. That's really the biggest knock. But as far as what Kluber can do and his talents, he ranks amongst the best of them, and that's why he's the 6th-ranked starter here. David Price checks in 7th, refound his strikeout rate last year. I had questions about whether he was going to miss as many bats last year. He answered those questions and more. 26.9% strikeout rate, 108 whip, 278 FIP, keeps the ball on the ground, backed by a really good offense, should win some games, should pile up strikeouts, really going to help the ratios. Big David Price fan. Number 8 is Steven Strasburg, and his upside exceeds, I would say, basically everyone on this list, with the exception of obviously Kershaw, but I mean, he could catapult up to that number 2 SP. 27.9% strikeout rate, huge. Pitches in the National League, which is also huge. So while Sale might be the more talented pitcher, the fact that he gets to pitch against National League lineups, I would say actually gives him a slightly higher ceiling. Obviously, we're not just dealing with ceiling, or Strasburg would rank higher. 112 whip, 294 FIP, battled a bit of a high BABIP last year, struggled with the home run per fly ball rate. If those things regress a little bit, Strasburg could outperform the guys in front of him. As it stands, even if those things don't regress, even if he's throwing the occasional cookie, and maybe that's the issue here with the high BABIP and the home run fly ball rate, we're still talking about a guy that's striking out almost 28% of the batters he faces. Great pitcher, great staff anchor. My biggest concern with him is that he eclipsed 200 innings for the first time last year in his career. Can he continue to be a workhorse like that? I think he can. I'm not super concerned. If I was, he wouldn't rank in the top 10. He's a staff anchor for me. Number 9 is another Dodger pitcher, Zach Greinke. When you pitch in the same rotation as Clayton Kershaw, maybe you don't get your just due. 25.2% strikeout rate, 115 whip, 297 FIP, solid 48.7% ground ball rate. Does it all. Has been great since joining the Los Angeles Dodgers. Really like what he can do. Pitches in the National League West. Obviously, he'll have to deal with Coors Field on occasion, but does have some pitcher-friendly ballparks to kind of offset that. Really like Zach Greinke this year. A little bit cheaper than some of the names in front of him, most likely in drafts. So if you're looking to get an ace, but maybe not pay that premium of the guys in front of him, Zach Greinke's your guy. Carlos Carrasco is my guy, though. He ranks 10th. As a starting pitcher last year, 28.1% strikeout rate, just a 5.6% walk rate, 0.98 whip, 221 FIP, 50.4% ground ball rate. I might regret ranking him this low by season's end. I think this is a guy that could be a top 5 starting pitcher. I think he's going to make a run at the American League Cy Young Award. Love what he did. There are definitely some skeptics out there. He's a bit of a polarizing figure. Some people are cautioning, he didn't have that many great starts. Look at his track record of struggles. But you know what? Mickey Callaway gets the pitching coach for the Indians, has done great with. He did great with the reclamation project. Scott Kazmir really gets a lot out of the rotation. Look at what he did with Corey Kluber. I really buy into him. I believe what I saw. The underlying statistics are great. And Carrasco, you have to remember, was a top pitching prospect. The stuff's never been in question. His application of using the stuff in games has been the problem. So I'm a huge Carlos Carrasco guy. He's my ace of choice because he can be had much cheaper than the other pitchers here. I think you're looking at a top 10 starting pitcher. Number 11 is another guy that broke out last season, Jake Arrieta, the Cubs. 27.2% strikeout rate, 0.99 whip, 226 FIP, 49.2% ground ball rate. He too does it all. Doesn't allow a lot of base runners, big strikeout rate, big ground ball rate. Swing strike rate's not quite as big as the guy in front of him, Carlos Carrasco. Might see a little bit of strikeout regression, but still a guy that should strike out more than a quarter of the batters he faces. Backed by an even better offense this year in Chicago, a newly revamped one. I like him to win some games. Really think he's another staff ace. Rounding out your SP1s in your standard 12-team mixed league is a guy returning from Tommy John, had plenty of time to recover, Matt Harvey. 2013, let me remind you of the brilliance of Matt Harvey. 27.7% strikeout rate, 0.93 whip, 200 FIP, 47.7% ground ball rate. The Mets have said that there are no restrictions on him. Maybe they will change their tune towards the end of the season, depending on how they're faring in the wild card race. But I think he should approach 200 innings. The velocity's back. Reports of the slider being there are favorable. So I'm a big fan of Harvey. I'm buying into him. I know there's some risk buying a guy off of injury, but the stuff's back, and that's really what matters to me. 13th is Cole Hamels. A lot of trade rumors swirling around him. I don't expect he'll be in Philadelphia all year, which is actually good, assuming that because I'm not the type that's going to analyze his psychological makeup changing teams. Some guys have issues with it, I guess, but I'm going to look at the numbers and strictly look at the numbers. 23.9% strikeout rate, 115 whip, 307 FIP. I think a trade is going to be beneficial. I don't see him just crumbling. It's not as if he was pitching in a quiet media area in Philadelphia anyway. In fact, I would say there aren't many teams that he could be traded to where you're going to have more of a media storm than where he is. So I think Hamels will be just fine. Should continue to miss bats. If he gets dealt to a pitcher-friendly ballpark, numbers could go up. I don't necessarily think he'll rank any higher than this, even if he's dealt before the season to a favorable situation. I can't see myself moving him up, but he's just on that periphery of being an SP1, really strong SP2 for me. Johnny Cueto checks in at 14th. My biggest concern with him is the workload increase. Maybe it's a small pitcher bias from me, but 243.2 innings from a guy that isn't a big pitcher does concern me a little bit, but not enough to really ding Cueto. 25.2% strikeout rate was up last year from years past. Did sacrifice some ground balls for that. 46.2% ground ball rate is still good. If he's able to find some kind of happy medium, give a few strikeouts back, keep the ball on the ground, not necessarily a bad trade since he does pitch in homer-friendly Great American Ballpark. 0.96 whip, 330 FIP. He really is a very good pitcher. If you're less concerned about the innings than I am, you could probably move him up as high as 10th. I wouldn't put him in front of my boy Carrasco, but if you did, I'd certainly understand that. 15th is Garrett Cole, another man crush of mine. 24.2% strikeout rate, 121 whip, 323 FIP, 49.2% ground ball rate. Pitches in a great pitcher's ballpark. According to Brooks Baseball, has 3 pitches that generated a 14% or better whiff rate. So he's got all the tools there. Big fastball, upper 90s fastball. And like I said, great pitcher's park. Really like Garrett Cole. I could see him emerging as an SP1 this season, and that's why he ranks just outside the SP1s. There is some risk with him being a younger pitcher still, but I really like Garrett Cole. Big fan of his this year. Number 16, we've got Jordan Zimmerman, another really strong pitcher in the Nationals rotation. Saw strikeout rate go up last year, still stays in the strike zone, keeps the ball on the ground. Pitching in a walk year, really expect good things from him. Backed by a good offense, should win some games. Alex Cobb, we had a bit of a scare with him in the spring, dealt with some forearm tendonitis, but he's expected back in April. So I might bump him down a few spots, but he still looks like he's an SP2, top 24 arm for me. Keeps the ball on the ground, can miss some bats. Really like what Alex Cobb can do. Julio Teheran is 18th, guy that beats his FIP regularly. Some guys are scared off by the guys like that beat their ERA estimators, but it looks like a trend to me. I like Teheran's ability to miss some bats. I do think you could see some strikeout rate uptick for him. Backed by a bad offense, so going to hurt his win chances, but pitches deep into the games. Even great pitchers on bad teams can find a way to win some games sometimes. Of course, you also end up with the occasional Matt Cain or King Felix Hernandez, where no matter how brilliantly you pitch, you're looking like a 500 pitcher if you're backed by a bad enough offense. So there is some risk with taking Teheran inside the top 20, but as far as statistically speaking, I am a big Teheran fan. Adam Wainwright, on the other hand, I'm not as big of a fan of this year. I have him ranked 19th. I think he's going to disappoint. Don't see a sub-3 whip. RJ White of CBSSports.com and I discussed him on Friday's podcast. We both think he's going to be a bust this year. Too much talent around him in the SP ranks to really feel good about his ADP. He's being drafted like an SP1. I just don't see it. Strikeout rate, swinging strike rate went down last year. Strikeout rate went down with it. Ground ball rate was down. Still has great control, but diminishing velocity. A little worried about Wainwright. Not a big fan. Won't be on my rosters. John Lester checks in 20th. Good move from the AL East to the National League. Did have a career year, so I would expect some regression. Thankfully, the move to the National League should help fight off that regression a bit. Still going to strike out some batters. Still going to post some very good numbers, backed by good offense. Big Lester fan. Garrett Richards is 21st. Really love Garrett Richards. If you're looking for a guy who could outperform some of the guys in front of him, Garrett Richards is my guy. Already pitching in spring training. Should be ready very early this season. 2.60 FIP last year, ranked 5th among qualified starters. 24.2% strikeout rate. 104 WHIP. 50.9% ground ball rate. So if he's back in mid-April, as long as everything continues to remain on track, we're talking about a guy that had a leg injury, not a knee injury, not an arm or shoulder injury. So not a guy that I'm concerned with there. Really love Garrett Richards. Throws hard, misses bats. My kind of guy. Masahiro Tanaka, 22nd. This is a guy that it's going to be polarizing come draft time. He's pitching through a partially torn UCL, could be shut down at any time and require Tommy John surgery. If he were fully healthy, if there were not that Tommy John concern, he'd probably rank a full 10 spots higher. He'd be an SP1. Really can miss bats. 26.0% strikeout rate last year, 304 FIP. 106 WHIP. Struggled with home runs a little bit, but that could be a long-term issue since he is pitching in homer-friendly Yankee Stadium. But the rest of the underlying stats look great. I'd probably be more willing to take Tanaka. I'd be willing to take him ahead of a few arms here, especially if I already have an SP1, or I feel like it's worth targeting, maybe pairing a Richards and Tanaka, not paying that premium for an SP1. But if I'm not relying on Tanaka as my SP1, he's a guy that I personally would target. I'm willing to take that risk, but it really, you're going to have to build some depth if you take him just to have that insurance in case the elbow does eventually require surgery. Hisashi Iwakuma checks in 23rd. The splitter specialist is backed by a better offense this year. It's hard to really get, much like Zach Greinke, tough to get that limelight when you're pitching behind one of the best pitchers in the game. In Iwakuma's case, that's King Felix, but Iwakuma is a fantastic pitcher, can keep the ball on the ground, great ratios guy, can miss bats at a decent rate, not a huge strikeout guy, lags behind some of the guys in front of him, actually lags behind some of the guys that are behind him, but big Iwakuma fan. Jeff Samardzija put it all together last year, pitched really well with the Cubs and the A's, was tough luck in terms of not getting as many wins as he deserved given his statistics, but really good pitcher, really good stuff. Chicago White Sox should provide him more run support this year. Should see an uptick in wins. I think he can still miss bats. I have him on the periphery of that SP2, right on that SP2, SP3 range. Some people are going to like him a little bit better, like the component stats. I'm a fan of Shark, but I could see him getting sniped in front of me by a few people, and I do like some of the names ahead of him, and that's why they rank there. 25th is James Shields, makes the move from the American League Central with the Royals to the National League West with the Padres. He's going to be fronting a good Padres rotation. Love the ballpark. Really like Big James' underlying statistics. Biggest concern for me is what should be a substandard outfield defense. They don't really have a true center fielder with Will Myers probably playing there. The outfield corners are going to be flanked by Justin Upton and Matt Kemp, who can probably do a passable job in the corners, but we're not talking about good defense out there. We're talking about poor defenders. Ultimately, that's going to cost some of the Padres hurlers. They don't have great pitch framers behind the plate anymore either. Rene Rivera out of town, which hurts. And Yasmani Grandal also out of town. They have Derek Norris back there now, probably going to catch the bulk of games. Not as good of a pitch framer. So I do still like Shields. Probably not quite SP2 for me. More like a strong SP3. If the outfield defense projects to, or outplays what I expect them to do, he could be worth a little bit more than where I'm drafting him, but I just don't see it. I don't think it's a good outfield defense. Infield has some questions as well. So I like Big Game James, but I can see him being overdrafted based on name reputation and things like that, and people overvaluing the move to the National League and not accounting for the defense behind him. Gio Gonzalez checks in at 26th. It's unbelievable the length that this Washington Nationals lineup has. He's the fourth National to crack the list, 4 in the top 26, unheard of. Big bat misser. Walk rate was down last year. Big Gio Gonzalez fan. Really like him. Really like the offense behind him. Should win some games this year. And as long as he retains the control gains, could be a decent source in whip. Not going to be a guy that carries you there, but not going to be a guy that hurts you there like he did when he struggled with his walk rates. Big bat misser, though. Speaking of bat missers, Tyson Ross, his slider is just filth. Throws hard. Really brilliant pitcher. My biggest concern with Ross is the loss of Rivera and Grandal behind the plate. Not great control for Ross. His pitches have a lot of movement. His walk rate could suffer with Norris behind the dish, but ultimately, I really like Ross. Keeps the ball on the ground at a really high rate, so he shouldn't be hurt too badly by the outfield defense behind him. But he is another Padres starter who, when the ball's lifted, could be an adventure out there in the outfield. So I do like Tyson Ross. If he had a better pitch framer behind the plate, better outfield defense behind him, he'd definitely be squarely in the SP2 range, probably a top 20 starter, but I'm going to ding him a little bit for the defense behind him. Jacob deGrom, fantastic rookie season with the Mets. Not the heralded prospect in the same class as a Zach Wheeler or Noah Syndergaard, but you know what? He performed better. Really like the statistics there. Do think there's a little bit of regression for deGrom this year. Do have to wonder how he's going to be affected by the center field and right center field fences being moved in a little bit, but the underlying stats are glowing. Really like deGrom. SP3 with maybe some SP2 upside. He is coming off of his first season, so there's a little bit of risk investing in a young arm like that. Maybe the league catches up to him a little bit, but I don't think so. I like the numbers there. Big deGrom fan. 29th is Hyunjin Ryu. These rankings were compiled before he was dealing with the shoulder injury. He's going to plummet. The fact that he's dealing with the shoulder injury that he said feels very similar to last year concerns me. No structural damage shown in the MRI. Shouldn't be a long-term issue, but when you're talking shoulder, it does worry me that he's gonna be shut down for a little bit, gonna miss some time. So he's gonna plummet. Stay tuned to his health, but I can't give a guy dealing with shoulder injuries a ringing endorsement. May not even be a top 50 arm by the time I get my rankings updated again. Alex Wood, lefty for Atlanta. Both RJ and I discussed him on the podcast on Friday. RJ loves him. I love him as well. Big bat misser, was a guy that some prospect evaluators had concerns about being a starter long term. He answered the bell and was fantastic. There should be no questions about him starting going forward. He could outperform rotation mate Julio Teheran. Biggest knock on him is the same as Teheran. Bad offense backing him could make it very difficult to win some games, but really a great bat misser. As a left-hander, surprisingly doesn't have struggles with right-handed batters, so decent split. Not a guy that you have to worry about facing right-handed batters, so right-handed heavy lineups shouldn't scare you off of Wood. Really like Wood. Homer Bailey ranks 31st. He should be ready in early to mid-April for a return. He's throwing now, building up some arm strength. Struggled early in the season, was really strong before being shut down with injury and undergoing surgery late last fall. As long as the arm strength gets back, as long as the velocity's back, this is a guy who should strike out more batters than he did last year. Big Homer Bailey fan. I think you can probably get him at a slight discount because his numbers weren't super glowing last year due to his slow start. I love him as an SP3 who could perform like an SP2. Matt Shoemaker, kind of from that Jacob deGrom school of not a highly touted prospect, but really was fantastic last year. Great underlying statistics. Did fairly well against left-handed batters, even though he really relies heavily on a fastball slider combination, but really like Matt Shoemaker. Could be an SP2 by season's end. Would like to see a little bit more, but I'm a big fan. Backed by a good offense. Can really pile up strikeouts, really limits walks, should be a good source of whip, ERA, strikeout rate, and ratios booster. So Matt Shoemaker, buy into him. If others are skeptical, let them watch as he piles up good numbers for you. Colin McHugh, another breakout star last year from the American League West. Junk baller, scrapped a sinker, good move. Threw his four-seam fastball more, threw up in the zone, used some breaking balls to to pile up some strikeouts. Allows some fly balls, so it's going to have some problems with the homer on occasion, especially playing his home games at Minute Maid Park, but I'm a McHugh fan. Dallas Keuchel, his rotation mate, ranks 34th. Doesn't have the upside of McHugh because he's not as big of a strikeout artist, but he also isn't going to deal with the home run issues because he had the highest ground ball rate among qualified starters last year, north of 60%. Really uses his sinker to keep the ball on the ground, attack hitters early, has a nice slider that can miss some bats if he does get to 2 strike counts. Probably going to post a slightly below league average strikeout rate because he is willing to pitch to contact early with his sinker, which does have its benefits. He's going to pitch deeper into games, keep his pitch count down, should put him in a better position to win games. The Houston Astros offense has some boomer bust capabilities, but they're going to score some runs for him this year. Dallas Keuchel, because he pitches deep into games, should get some more wins, maybe get some more wins than rotation mate Colin McHugh. Going to lag behind in strikeouts, but still not exactly terrible in that category. If you're in head-to-head leagues and you don't, so you're not going to obviously have the innings pitched restrictions, like Keuchel a little bit more. If you're in roto leagues where you do have a low innings pitched limit, might want to grab strikeout boosting reliever who can also help you in the ratios. Michael Wacha checks in 35th. Missed some time last year. Looked sharp here in the spring. Can miss some bats. Can stay in the strike zone. I'm a Wacha fan, backed by good offense. Danny Salazar is 36. He's going to drop in my rankings. He was demoted to AAA, but you know what? I still love him. Remember, he got off to a slow start last year. Had a big finish in the second half. Ultimately, whoever finishes it the spring opening as the 5th starter, whether it's Zach McAllister or Josh Tomlin, I think TJ House is pretty much a slam dunk for the 4th starter. McAllister doesn't have the upside that Salazar has. Neither does Tomlin. Ultimately, I think Salazar claims that 5th starter job if he can get himself straightened out in the minors. Big stuff. Big Salazar fan still. Top 50 arms still for me. Got to drop him, though, because he isn't going to start the year in the rotation. But he could be up fairly soon if he gets it together down there. 37th is Scott Kazmir. His comeback story is unbelievable. Pitched well for Cleveland in 2013. Got paid by the A's. Continued to pitch well for them. Sonny Gray's 38th. Although they're going to have him ranked higher. Look at the swinging strike rate. Not totally blown away by it. His control is good, not great. I think people that are overdrafting him currently. So I like Sonny Gray if you can get him as your SP3, SP4, but I think he's being drafted more along the lines of an SP2, and that's too rich for my blood. Lance Lynn is 39th. He's a guy that was able to reduce his WOBA against left-handed batters last year, which is good news. Closed that split a bit. Big innings horse. Can miss bats, strikeout rate north of 20%. So he's a guy that's reliable. Some of the media like to overvalue the wins. We're smarter than that. We know that wins are the product of a team, but he's backed by a good offense, so you still expect him to win games. I like Lance Lynn. I especially like the gains against left-handed batters last year. Derek Holland checks in 40th. He's a guy that I wrote about for FantasyPros as a sleeper. Really like the fact that he was leaning on his slider more last year. Control gains in his limited time pitching last year. I think he'll give some of that back, but control gains could be real. And the strikeout rate's deceiving last year. Whiff rate, his swinging strike rate was up, but his strikeout rate was down. The reason the swinging strike rate was up is because he was leaning on that slider more. If he's willing to do that, I really like him to outperform his ADP by a wide margin and for him to finish as a top 40 starter. Yordano Ventura checks in 41st. Really electric fastball. Good swinging strike rate. Portends well for a boost in strikeout rate this year. I don't love the offense backing him. Do love the defense backing him. Think you're going to get solid ratio numbers. Good strikeout rate. But I do worry about the run support for picking up some wins. But I ultimately, Yordano Ventura, still a top 50 arm for me. Chris Archer, another guy that was able to close the gap on his struggles with left-handed batters. So Archer looks good at 42nd. Can miss some bats, can keep the ball on the ground. Not backed by a great offense in Tampa. Could be a decent offense. It really depends on some of the young players that they have there. So team worth keeping an eye on, but Archer's a solid option. Jose Fernandez, 43rd. Looks like he should be back sometime in June, possibly July. The earlier he gets back, the more likely he is to perform as a top 50 starter. In head-to-head leagues, I would draft him significantly higher. I would probably take him in the top 30 because you can stash him on your disabled list. Even if you don't have DL spots, you can stash him on your bench and have a fantasy ace come the second half of the season and ultimately playoff time. So I'm a big Jose Fernandez fan. Drafted him in a league that I'm in as a stash candidate, and I'm enamored with the stuff. I do think that that'll be back. The recovery from Tommy John to past performance isn't a given for everybody, but so far so good in terms of reports on his rehab. So I'm believing that Fernandez can come back and be the brilliant star that he was before. And in head-to-head leagues, definitely worth grabbing a little bit higher. Phil Hughes is 44th. He's an advanced stats darling. He's not a secret to anybody that understands FIP and ERA estimators. Pounded the strike zone. He does not have great pitch framers behind the dish in Minnesota, but it doesn't matter. Hughes is in the strike zone a lot. Can miss some bats. I think people that lean too heavily on FIP without looking at all of Hughes's numbers might be a little bit disappointed this year. I don't think he's a fantasy ace. I don't think he's a number 2. I think he's a solid 3. I'd rather draft him as a 4 because the fact is he has underperformed his FIP in seasons past. I'm not sure if that's a trend that's going to continue, but look at rotation mate Ricky Nolasco as a perfect example of sometimes the underlying stats, they should add up to one thing. They don't end up turning into the results that you'd expect them to. That's not to say that I think Phil Hughes is going to be Ricky Nolasco 2.0 where he underperforms his FIP year in and year out, but I do think that there's reason to proceed with a little bit of caution. I do like Hughes, though. I imagine somebody in my leagues, especially leagues where you've got saber-savvy drafters, is probably going to be willing to roll the dice a little bit higher than I am, though. 45th is Drew Smyly. He pitched brilliantly after the Rays acquired him last year. I still have concerns about right-handed batters. He struggles with them a bit, but otherwise the numbers look good. Smiley's got some upside. If he can close the gap and reduce his base runners and find some more success against right-handed batters, he can make this ranking look bad by season's end, but ultimately he's got to do it first. I'm not willing to roll the dice on him making the kind of gains to outperform his draft rank right here. But if you draft him and you can get him in there against some lefty heavy lineups or some lineups that just aren't righty heavy, then Smyly should be a fine option. Ian Kennedy, another Padres arm that's going to benefit from the ballpark, benefit from the league, but not going to benefit from the defense behind him. Had a very good year last year, can miss some bats when he's going right. He did have some struggles in his last year in Arizona, so I guess there is some reason for concern, but ultimately top 50 arm to me. Anibal Sanchez, we know the drill with him. Has never pitched over 200 innings in a season. Probably going to miss some time just because that's the nature of Anibal Sanchez. Misses some time, but when he's on the hill, really good source of ERA, WHIP. His strikeout numbers from 2013 look like a bit of a fluke compared to the rest of his career. Don't expect him to bounce back in strikeout rate to that extent, but should be at least an average contributor there. Biggest knock on him again is health, but otherwise pitches like an SP2 when he's on the hill are pretty darn close to it. So value here if you can withstand the eventual time missed. Backed by a good offense, should win some games. Jesse Hahn's a guy that I really like, acquired by the Oakland Athletics in a deal with the San Diego Padres. Can keep the ball on the ground, can miss bats. Walk rate's a little bit high. If he can make some gains with his control, we could be talking about a really special pitcher here. Really like Jesse Hahn. Carlos Martinez, 49th. Looks like he could open in the Cardinals rotation as the number 5 starter. Jaime Garcia is dealing with some shoulder fatigue, and we know that the story with Jaime Garcia, struggles to stay healthy. Even if he does come back and pitch in that rotation, maybe this is speculation on my part, but given Martinez's limited workload, since he relieved quite a bit last year, given the youth of Marco Gonzalez, given the health issues of Jaime Garcia, maybe they go to something of a 6-man rotation for a while until Jaime Garcia ultimately succumbs to another injury. It's sad to say that. I don't wish ill will on anybody, but when Garcia's missed as much time as he has, it feels more like a when than an if with him. And I love Carlos Martinez, though. Huge swinging strike rate, Fastball, two fastballs, fastball, four seam and sinker that can miss bats, backed with a changeup and a slider that are real bat missers as well. Huge Carlos Martinez fan. He's on the small stature side, but electric arm. And if he can make any control gains at all, we could be talking about a special pitcher. If he doesn't make control gains, we've seen guys like Francisco Liriano get by with great ground ball rate and bat missing ability. Martinez, I think a healthy Martinez that's in the rotation has a floor of a Francisco Liriano where you get the occasional clunker due to control issues. But any control issue gains, I mean, we could be talking about a fringe SP1 at this time next year. So big Carlos Martinez fan. AJ Burnett rounds out the top 50 for me. Returns to Pittsburgh this year, was brilliant with them in 2012 and 2013. Keeps the ball on the ground at a high rate, can miss bats when he's going right. Keep in mind, last year's ugly numbers came with him pitching with a sports hernia. Give him a pass on last year. He's an older starter. I understand some of the trepidation with drafting him, but I really like AJ Burnett. I think he's going to return a nice investment for those willing to roll the dice on a late-round pick with him. Michael Pineda's 51st. Health issues have caused problems for him, but he was brilliant last year. Andrew Cashner, 52nd. San Diego, same story. Bad defense. Biggest concern with Cashner, hasn't really worked a ton of innings. Can he be that 200 inning pitch starter? Not sure yet, but big fastball. If you ever wanted to rely on his secondary pitches a little bit more, could pile up more strikeouts, but haven't really seen anything to indicate that. Seems to be happy inducing ground balls and really relying on his sinker. 53rd is Irvin Santana. Don't like the move from the National League East to the American League Central, but does have a swing and miss slider. Can get some strikeouts. Will occasionally give up the gopher ball because he does have a proclivity for giving up fly balls and doesn't really induce ground balls at a high rate. John Lackey, 54th, wasn't as good with St. Louis after getting dealt there from Boston, but did miss some bats. Do think that he has some upside this year. Solid guy to round out your rotation with. R.A. Dickey, you know the deal with him. Knuckleball when it's going well can really miss bats. Problem is when it's not dancing, it's very hittable. So he pitches in a homer-friendly ballpark. Going to have some clunkers. Going to have some good starts. I would say probably a better option for roto leagues because the end-of-season numbers are really all you care about there. Head-to-head leagues. The fact that he's going to have some inconsistencies would bother me. So not a huge fan of Dickey in head-to-head leagues. Think he's an okay back-of-the-rotation guy in roto leagues. Should be backed by a good offense. Should pitch deep into games. Should get some wins because he's backed by a good offense. Matt Garza ranks 56. Would love to see him throw the slider more. If he does that, going to strike out more batters. Probably outpitch this rank. If he doesn't, if he continues to lean on his fastball more, probably going to be ranked a little bit too high. Got to put him somewhere, so I kind of hedged and picked the middle. But next up is Jason Hamill, returns to the Cubs. Really like Hamill. Pitched brilliantly for the Cubs last year. Wasn't as good with Oakland, but he's back in Chicago now. Should fare well. Really like his ability to miss bats. Think that he's backed by a good offense, so I'm a Hamill fan. Kevin Gausman's a guy that I think has breakout potential with the Orioles. Really like his splitter. Would love to see him rely on it a little bit more to miss some bats. If he does that, going to outperform this rank. If he does not, the numbers could be a little bit ho-hum for a top 60 starter. Matt Cain has mentioned that he's having a little bit of elbow soreness, but also mentioned that it's part of the rehab process. It's expected. Doesn't sound like it's anything out of the ordinary. Doesn't sound like it's anything that should be a super concern. People should be more concerned with the fact he didn't pitch well in the 2 years leading up to having, I should say 2013 part of last season, before undergoing elbow surgery to remove a loose body, I believe, and deal with an elbow spur. Should be healthy this year. Was a guy that outperformed his FIP regularly. Can probably continue to do that at AT&T Park. Not a huge strikeout pitcher, but there is a little bit of upside for rolling the dice with him late. There is also some downside, though, and that's that he performs like he did in 2013-14. I think this is a perfect place to take a chance on him. Could rank a little bit lower, but I think this feels fair to me. 60th, Francisco Liriano. Story remains the same. Ground ball rate's great. Controls lackluster. Strikeout rate's big. Always risk that a guy like Liriano, who has poor control, just completely loses it and really struggles. But his slider, his changeup, really good pitches. Really can pile up strikeouts at a big rate. Great pitcher's park. Really like what he's done in Pittsburgh. Jose Quintana outperformed, was a great source in FIP last year. FIP supported his numbers. Problem is, dig a little bit deeper. His strikeout rate went up despite his swinging strike rate going down. I do think he gives some strikeouts back this year. Backed by a good offense, though. Can pile up some innings. Quintana's not a bad starter, but I do think he'll be overdrafted if people rely too heavily on FIP and don't look at the swinging strike rate and kind of question where did that strikeout rate come from. Speaking of guys and strikeout rates, Doug Fister does not miss a lot of bats. I shudder to think what happens with a little bit of BAPIP poor luck. He had good luck last year. Backed by a good offense, so he should win games. Going to pitch deep into games because he has great control and pitches to contact. But anytime you're relying almost entirely on your fielders to generate outs, I have problems with relying on you as a starter. I mean, BAPIP vagaries could cause Fister to post, a mid-3, high-3 ERA. See his FIP rise or see his WHIP rise a little bit if he's giving up more base runners, and you're talking about an average pitcher that you really need wins from in order to justify being more than like an SP5 or a guy that just barely rounds out your rotation. Justin Verlander, rebound candidate, but he's older. When I say rebound, I'm not talking AL Cy Young form, but I am saying more strikeouts, some wins. He dealt with core surgery early last season, was healthy all year, but has talked about how he just didn't have the range of motion he needed. Keep an eye on his velocity. That, to me, is the biggest key with Verlander. If he's throwing as hard as he was even just a couple years ago, he should move up the rankings, but I don't have any velocity reports right now. No Brooks baseball data because he's not pitching in spring training parks that capture that. So don't really know what to make of Verlander at this point. Hard to buy into him until we know exactly where that velo is. Willie Peralta, 64. I'm a fan. Keeps the ball on the ground. I think if he uses his changeup and slider a little bit more this year, you can see an uptick in strikeouts. James Paxton's a guy that I like a little less than a lot of people. Really good hammer curveball. Can miss some bats. Biggest concern with him is his control. It's not great. I do think that could be problematic at times this year. Really needs to throw a few more strikes. The swinging strike rate doesn't necessarily line up with a strikeout rate to date, so maybe he gives a few strikeouts back. There are enough questions that I would prefer some of the names in front of him. Trevor Bauer made some control gains last year, still poor control in general, but really deep arsenal, picked up some ticks on his fastball, and I really believe in Mickey Callaway and what he's doing with the pitchers in Cleveland. 66 for me. Taijuan Walker, 67th. Electric fastball, good secondary pitch, throwing a slider this spring that looks sharp. I believe in Walker. I think he's going to have some control. He does have some control issues at times, but really bright prospect, really high upside. Jake Odorizzi, 68th. Nice strikeout rate last year. Does have some problems with fly balls resulting in home runs. His strikeout rate doesn't necessarily line up with his stuff. Not a great stuff guy, not a big fastball, not a standout great secondary pitch, but has a deep arsenal, uses that to his advantage. I like Odorizzi. I'm not sure I completely buy into the strikeout rate yet, though. Kyle Osha, 69th. He can be a good source of whip. Could win some games with the Brewers, but not going to help you in strikeouts. ERA has outperformed his FIP since getting straightened out by Dave Duncan in St. Louis. So I do think that he can legitimately continue to outperform his FIP, but not a great pitcher. More of a guy that you have to prop up in roto leagues with strict innings limits with a high strikeout reliever. Jared Weaver, no thank you. Diminished velocity, not what he once was. I'll pass on him. Speaking of diminished velocity, Matt Lato's fastball was down 2 ticks last year. Makes the move from hitter-friendly, from homer-friendly, Great American Ballpark to Miami, to Marlins Park. People will probably buy into the move, but I'm looking at that velocity and I'm saying no thank you. Michael Fiers, guy that does not throw hard, but the underlying stats support the brilliance. I just have a hard time buying into a guy throwing under 90, continuing to have the success that Fiers has had. I think he's a good pick in the 70s. I think people are going to probably overdraft him based on the underlying stats, which normally I'd be fully behind, but at a certain point, look at the pitch FX data, and I have to question, how is this guy with a sub-90s fastball continuing to miss bats? If it's deception, is his division going to catch up to him with multiple looks? Could happen. So I'm going to hedge a little bit and rank him outside the top 70. Tim Hudson doesn't miss bats, keeps the ball on the ground though. Doesn't allow a ton of base runners. Could be helpful in WHIP. Good ballpark. Should keep his ERA in check, but he's not going to help you much in strikeouts. Giants did little to help their offense this offseason, so it'll be interesting to see if he gets enough run support to really be helpful in wins. But if you're looking to round out your rotation, get some whip help, Tim Hudson checks in well at 73rd. 74th is Jake Peavy. He really fared well once he made the change to once he was dealt to San Francisco, and a big part of that was leaning on his fastball less and junk balling it a little bit more and going to his secondaries. I wonder if he can continue to have success just leaning on the secondaries like that. Have to wonder how the elbow will do using the secondary pitches more and leaning on his fastball less. But at 74th, you could do worse than Peavy. Brandon McCarthy, another guy that if you like advanced metrics, you're going to like Brandon McCarthy. And I do, but my biggest concern isn't the advanced metrics. It's the fact that McCarthy struggled to stay healthy throughout his career. He's going to have to stay healthy to be a fantasy asset. So got to knock him down a few pegs for the health issues from yesteryear, but the advanced metrics look good. So if you're willing to roll the dice on health more than I am with McCarthy, you can shoot him up significantly on this list. Wade Miley checks in 76th, makes the move from the National League to the American League East. Not a big fan of that. Worried about the strikeout rate going back down again. Has some control issues at times. Last year, he saw his control wane a little bit. I think part of that was going for strikeouts. So not sure what to make of Miley exactly moving to the American League East, but I'm not as big of a fan as I would have been if he remained in the National League West. Shelby Miller, a bit of an enigma, had a really good first season with St. Louis as a rookie, relied on his fastball and curveball mostly. His changeup isn't exactly a great pitch by any stretch. Throws hard though. If he can get that swinging strike rate back up with his four-seam fastball, get his curveball missing some bats a little bit more again, could outperform this position a lot. Good dice roll late. I like the upside, but the advanced statistics were not favorable for Shelby Miller last year. Mike Leake, guy that can keep the ball on the ground, checks in 78th. Doesn't walk a lot of batters, doesn't strike out a lot of batters. Stays in the strike zone. If the Reds offense is clicking, could end up with some more wins, could end up outperforming this rank, but the ceiling's limited because he is not a big bat misser. Does struggle with left-handed batters too, so you won't want to start him against lefty-heavy lineups. TJ House is a guy that's maybe not flying below the radar as much anymore. Advanced stats guys do like him. He's a guy that struggles with right-handed batters, though, so you'll have to be careful trotting him out against righty-heavy lineups until he at least shows some gains there. But keeps the ball on the ground at a great rate, keeps the ball in the strike zone at a great rate, and has a passable strikeout rate. Rick Porcello, pitch to contact ground ball guy, pitched very well for the Tigers last year, backed by a very good offense in Boston. I do have some questions about the defense behind him in Boston. Not a huge fan, as I said, with Pfister, of these guys that rely on their fielders a great deal. So Porcello could be suffering in his ranking based on that bias from me. Andrew Heaney's 81st, probably going to move down the rankings a little bit, was optioned to AAA, struggled this spring, does have good stuff, highly ranked prospect, well regarded. So I do like Heaney long term. He's a guy that you should keep an eye on. Maybe can help some head-to-head teams down the stretch, can put up a good second half. Jonathan Neath for the Mets. Unexciting, but he's a decent source of he's not going to hurt you in ERA, not going to hurt you in WHIP. Doesn't have a huge strikeout rate, though, so you could probably get more valuable innings from others in strict innings roto leagues, but Neath is a decent option in head-to-heads where his strikeout rate's not going to hurt you as much. It's not terrible. It's around league average-ish. Henderson Alvarez, who checks in 83rd, on the other hand, doesn't miss bats, keeps the ball on the ground at a great rate. Better option head-to-head because of that strikeout rate where you're not going to have the strict innings restriction, but his upside's limited because he just doesn't miss bats. Kyle Gibson is a guy that I like. I have ranked 84th. I think he has the upside of a Dallas Keuchel 2013 breakout. Slider can miss some bats. Keeps the ball on the ground with everything he throws. All of his pitches are great ground ball pitches: sinker, slider, changeup. Really needs to make some gains against left-handed batters in terms of strikeout rate if he's going to move up this list. But In terms of being able to keep them on the ground, he can do that. At worst, you're looking at a guy like him. I could see him performing like Henderson Alvarez. At best, you get a few more strikeouts and you get a Dallas Keuchel 2013. Of course, Gibson didn't pitch terribly well by standard measure last year, so that's why he ranks behind a guy like Alvarez, behind guys like Nice, but he's a guy who could outperform his draft rank. He's a late round dice roll for me that I like. Nathan Eovaldi really needs his changeup to step forward if he's going to make the type of gains that he needs to. Throws really hard, got to like that, but the changeup just isn't there, and lefties feast on him. Justin Masterson was dreadful last year, is having a dreadful spring, probably going to drop out of my top 100 next time I update these. Giovanni Gallardo, what once was a great strikeout pitcher, now is a pitch to contact ground ball guy backed by a bad offense. No thank you. Alan Webster, interesting guy to follow. Decent swinging, very good swinging strike rate, has a slider and changeup that can miss bats, can keep the ball on the ground when the sinker is running well, does have some control issues, might not even start the season in the rotation for the Diamondbacks, but he's a guy that if he can really harness that control, has the components of being a very good pitcher. Problem is he just hasn't put it together yet. Jimmy Nelson, rotation spot freed up for him in Milwaukee due to Giovanni Gallardo getting dealt. Brilliant last year in the AAA Pacific Coast League. Do think he'll be good this year. FIP was better than his ERA last year. Struggled with some with stranding runners last year. Struggled with a high BAPIP. I do think he figures it out. Might have some growing pains. That's why he ranks a little bit lower than maybe his underlying statistics would suggest he should rank. Jason Vargas, not exciting. Could help you in WHIP. Backed by a good defense. So the fact that he pitches to contact shouldn't kill him. But again, limited ceiling and relying on batted balls is a dangerous way to go. Yusmeiro Petit would rank higher if he was in the rotation, but he's not in San Francisco. Was a very good reliever last year. Love his curveball, can really miss bats with that. If somebody is injured in the Giants rotation, if Timmy fumbles the job, I expect Petit to get the first crack, not Ryan Vogelsong, who's also working as a long reliever for the Giants. In the meantime, Petit should help boost ratios, should miss some bats. Not the worst option as a ratio reliever who has the upside to move into the rotation. 92nd, Kyle Hendricks, ground ball guy, great control, backed by a good offense. If you're looking to chase some wins, maybe Hendricks is your guy, not going to miss bats. CC Sabathia, coming off of knee surgery last year that ended his season, needs those fastball ticks back. Needs the ticks back on his fastball if he's going to be worth more than what he ranks. Could be a sub 100 ranked starting pitcher if he doesn't get that back, but monitor his velocity early in the season. Could be a guy that moves up fantasy rankings. Danny Duffy, don't be fooled by the ERA. Did miss a lot of bats last year. Does have a good fastball in terms of velocity. Has missed bats before in the past. That's why I have him ranked in the top 100, despite the fact that the underlying statistics don't look like a top 100 pitcher. I do think that he has good enough stuff that maybe he closes the gap this year. Dan Herron, good ballpark. You're looking at a guy that might pitch to a high 3, low 4 ERA. Good whip because he doesn't walk anybody, but you're drafting him for whip. You're trying to get some wins from that Miami offense, but you're not going to get a great source of ERA, not going to get many strikeouts. Wei-Yin Chen, not exciting, more of an AL only option. Drew Hutchinson would rank higher, probably should rank higher based on his strikeout rate, but fly ball issues and home run issues, and the Rogers Center is not a ballpark to give up all those fly balls. I know that there are some pundits out there that like Hutchinson quite a bit. I understand the love for the strikeout rate. I love the offense that backs him, but I really do worry about his fly ball rate. Probably going to move up slightly in my next rankings, but still not a guy that I'm targeting. I can think of some better options, and my ranking reflects that. Shane Green, guy that will be good against righty-heavy lineups, but look out for lefties, struggles with them. Has some upside because he can miss some bats, but more of a specialist, more of a stream option. The last two names on this list are relievers, Henry Mejia and Brandon Moore. Mejia is going to start the season as a closer. Could be pressed for some saves duty, closing duties by Bobby Parnell fairly early in the season. If he were assured that closer's job all year, would rank higher. Brandon Moore, love him as a ratios booster. really was brilliant last year when he was moved to the Mariners bullpen out of the starting rotation. I discussed a couple notable highly ranked pitchers above. Carlos Carrasco, I have ranked 10. Expert consensus rank is 27th. Don't really need to dive too deep in there. I really, as I said, I think he's going to make a run at that American League Cy Young. Love the numbers. Matt Shoemaker, my rank 32nd. Expert consensus rank 53rd. I think that just is reflective of the fact that people are unwilling to buy into the emergence of a guy that was a non-prospect. I like the underlying stats, though. I believe in Shoemaker. Derek Holland, my rank 40th, expert consensus rank 76. I think this comes down to maybe people not really looking at their swinging strike rate, not realizing that he was throwing the slider more, that there should be some more strikeout upside. I think his rank is also reflective of the fact that people really do worry about the Rangers' offense generating enough runs to win some games. Sonny Gray was a guy that I like less than the expert consensus rank. I'm ranked 38th, expert consensus rank of 23rd. As I said, I'd rather have Scott Kazmir. I think Jesse Hahn could outperform him this year in his own rotation. He's just not an SP2. Just doesn't have that swinging strike rate to support a huge strikeout rate. Decent walk rate, but it's a little worse than the league average. Looks like a good pitcher, doesn't look like a great one to me. Jose Quintana, I have ranked 61st. Expert consensus rank is 47th. As I said earlier in the pod, the swinging strike rate actually dropped while his K rate went up. Expect that K rate to drop back down this year. I think he's a good pitcher, not a bad option, but people that are looking at just his FIP and looking at their strikeout rate and not digging a little deeper are going to be a little bit disappointed. And Doug Fister, as I hammered on, I have him ranked 67th. Expert consensus rank is 37th. Doesn't miss enough bats for me. 14.8% strikeout rate last year, just not enough. Great walk rate, but had some BAPIP luck last year. And if he has a little bit of BAPIP bad luck this year, slight uptick in WHIP is going to hurt a guy, and slight uptick in ERA is going to hurt a guy that's just not going to help you in strikeouts. Should get you wins. Know what you're drafting with him. That's going to do it for today's starting pitcher rankings review podcast. Continue to get ready for the draft by stopping by FantasyBaseballCafe.com. Great content up there. Hop on the message boards. And until next time, when we cover the relief pitchers, thank you for tuning in. Have a good day.